What would you do if you lifted your bride's veil on your wedding day, only to realize the woman standing there wasn't the one you agreed to marry, and the truth could destroy everything your family built? Ethan Marshall stood frozen at the altar, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum echoing through a canyon. The grand cathedral was filled with hundreds of guests, most of them power players in business and politics, all of them waiting in perfect silence. What should have been the most polished day of his life, meticulously planned, dressed to perfection, suddenly felt like a stage trap closing in. The woman standing before him was not the one he expected. Though her face was covered by a delicate lace veil, Ethan could clearly see her silhouette, and she looked nothing like the woman in the photos his parents had shown him. That woman had pale skin, refined European features, and light hair. The woman in front of him had darker skin and a quiet stillness about her that made his pulse tick upward with confusion. "What is this?" he whispered, barely loud enough for the bride to hear. She didn't respond. Her hands clutched a bouquet of white roses so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. He turned his head slightly, scanning the front row. His father, Harold Marshall, sat like a stone sculpture, his cold eyes locked on Ethan's face. The unspoken message was clear: go through with this, or suffer the consequences. Ethan had lived 35 years under Harold's control. He had gone to the Ivy League schools his father picked, dated the appropriate women Harold approved of, and worked his way up to become COO of Marshall Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate his father built from the ground up. Every move he made had been according to Harold's blueprint. But this was too far. The minister cleared his throat, nudging the ceremony forward. Somewhere in the background, music began to play again, an attempt to smooth over the obvious tension that had dropped like a curtain in the room. Ethan's palms were sweating. His breath came shallow. He looked at the woman again, standing so still, like she knew something he didn't. He leaned in, whispered again. "Did you know about this?" Her answer was soft. "Yes." His body tensed. He looked around again, this time at the guests, the press, the investors. Selena Carter, the name his parents gave him, was supposedly the daughter of tech tycoon Gregory Carter, and this marriage was the final move to secure a historic merger between Marshall Enterprises and Carter Innovations. Together, the companies would become an unstoppable force in both finance and technology. Billions of dollars, entire futures, hinged on what he did next. And yet, Ethan felt like the ground had shifted under him. As the minister called for the vows, Ethan barely heard the words. He repeated his lines by memory, numb and mechanical. When Selena spoke, her voice trembled slightly, but there was something else in it, an ache, a resignation, a trace of sorrow that mirrored his own disillusionment. Then came the moment everyone waited for. "You may now kiss the bride." He hesitated. All eyes were on him as he lifted her veil. His breath caught when their eyes met, deep, expressive eyes filled with sadness and strength. Her skin was rich and dark, smooth and striking. She was beautiful, though not in the polished, rehearsed way his parents had taught him to expect. This wasn't a photoshopped model from a proposal document. This was a real woman. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't choose this either." Before he could answer, his father stood and began clapping loud, sharp applause that broke the awkward silence. The room erupted into celebration. The illusion had held. Ethan leaned in and placed a formal kiss on her cheek, then took her hand in his. Her grip was tense, reserved, but steady. Together, they walked down the aisle as husband and wife. But the vows they'd just exchanged felt less like the beginning of a marriage and more like the signing of a contract neither of them had wanted. The reception was a blur. Smiling faces, clicking cameras, hollow congratulations. Ethan remained close to Selena, not out of affection, but out of necessity. He needed answers, and he needed them now. When they finally found a moment alone in one of the estate's private lounges, Ethan turned to her. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low but firm.
"Really?" She met his eyes with a calm that surprised him. "I'm Selina Carter, the real one. The woman your father didn't want you to meet until it was too late to back out." His jaw tightened. "So, the woman in the photos was a model," she said quietly. "My father thought if they showed you the real me, you wouldn't agree to the marriage." I told him it was wrong. I begged him not to lie. But he said this was the only way the deal would go through. Ethan sat back, stunned. He had been lied to, manipulated, sold like a pawn on a chessboard. "I'm not angry at you," he said finally. "Not anymore." "But this whole thing, it's built on deception. I understand if you want an annulment," she said, her voice steady now. "I didn't ask for this either." Ethan looked at her, really looked this time. She had high cheekbones, a proud stance, and those haunting eyes that had followed him since the altar. And then he made a decision. Maybe not the logical one, maybe not the business-safe one, but a real one. "No annulment," he said. "Not yet. First, we get to the bottom of this. Together." Selina blinked. "Together?" Ethan nodded. "We'll smile for the cameras, pretend we're the happy couple for now, but behind the scenes, we're going to figure out why they thought they had to lie to us. And what we're going to do about it." And so, while the world toasted their so-called fairy tale, Ethan Marshall and Selina Carter made a quiet pact. It wasn't built on love. Not yet. But it was built on truth, and that, they both felt in their bones, was a much stronger foundation than lies. The applause had died down, but Ethan Marshall still felt the pressure pounding behind his eyes. The newlyweds' first dance had gone smoothly, at least on the surface. From the outside, they looked like the perfect power couple, a handsome billionaire and his elegant bride, gliding across the ballroom floor in perfect rhythm. But underneath it was all tension and unspoken questions. Selina Carter moved gracefully, her back straight, her steps precise. She smiled when she was supposed to. She nodded at guests, engaged in brief conversations with associates from both families. And yet, every time her hand met Ethan's, there was a subtle stiffness. Not cold, just cautious. Their parents, Harold Marshall and Gregory Carter, sat at the head table, sipping champagne like emperors watching their kingdoms merge. They looked proud, pleased, triumphant. Ethan clenched his jaw. He leaned towards Selina as they made their way through a crowd of shareholders and donors. "They think they've won," he muttered. She didn't look at him, but he felt her nod. Let them believe it. He was struck again by her calm. He had expected tears, maybe even a dramatic walkout. But instead, Selina had stood beside him with the poise of a diplomat. She hadn't asked for this marriage any more than he had. But here she was playing her part, just like him. When they finally reached a quiet corner near the grand staircase, Ethan turned to her. "You really are the daughter of Gregory Carter?" Selina nodded. "Born and raised. Then why hide you?" She hesitated. "Because I'm not the image they wanted to sell." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "They assumed you wouldn't want to marry a woman who looks like me. A black woman. A real one. Not a photoshopped version designed to make shareholders more comfortable." Her voice was steady, but there was pain behind the words. "They thought you'd back out if you knew." "I might have," he admitted quietly, and immediately regretted how that sounded. "Not because of your skin, Selina, but because I hate being lied to." She tilted her head, studying him. "Do you always say exactly what you're thinking? When it matters?" He paused. "Do you? Only when someone's earned it." That hung in the air between them. From the other side of the ballroom, Harold raised a glass toward Ethan, smiling like a man who believed the future was secure. Selina followed his gaze. "They've been planning this for years, haven't they?" Ethan nodded. "The merger's been their endgame for at least a decade. I just didn't realize they were willing to deceive both of us to get it." And now here we are, she said, almost under her breath. Legally married, bound by contract and business and legacy. Not by choice, Ethan added. Selina looked up at him. Then maybe we should start making choices of our own. He blinked. What do you mean? I mean, she said carefully, we play the game for now.
We act the part, go to events, show up for photos. Smile in the right places. But behind closed doors, we work on our own agenda. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. A sliver of hope, maybe.
And what would that agenda be? Finding a way to untangle ourselves from their plan, she said, without burning down our own futures in the process.
He studied her for a long moment. The ballroom lights reflected in her eyes, and for the first time, he saw more than just the stranger he had married. He saw someone strategic, courageous, and deeply alone.
Selina, he said slowly, are you suggesting we form an alliance? She gave a half smile. That depends.
Can you work with someone who challenges you? I think I'd prefer it, he replied honestly. They stood there for another beat as laughter and music swirled around them. Fine, Ethan said. We form a pact, 2 years. That's what the merger contract outlines, right? Appearances, social unity, a child eventually, but we can ignore that clause for now. Selina's face stiffened at the mention of the child clause. Yes, for now. We pretend in public, live separately as much as possible. But we keep the media calm, the shareholders happy, and in the meantime, we take back control, she finished. He extended his hand. Selina looked at it for a second before placing hers in his. Her grip was firm, solid. Partners? He asked. For now, she replied. But if you ever lie to me again, I won't, he said quickly. She nodded. Then we begin tonight. Their hands dropped, and with a mutual breath, they returned to the center of the ballroom this time. No longer just two pawns in a carefully scripted game. They were collaborators. Co-conspirators, two people quietly planning a future their families hadn't accounted for. And though neither of them dared admit it aloud, there was a flicker of something deeper underneath the arrangement. Not romance, not yet, but something that looked a lot like respect. And in a marriage built on lies, that was more than either of them had dared hope for. The sun had barely risen the next morning when Ethan Marshall opened his eyes, blinking against the soft golden light spilling into the massive master suite. He sat up in bed, immediately aware of the unfamiliar silence around him. No assistant knocking, no emails buzzing his phone, no voice from his father demanding progress. And then he remembered. He wasn't alone anymore. Across the suite, the heavy door to the sitting room creaked open. Selina Carter stepped out, wrapped in a simple ivory robe. Her hair, once pinned up tightly for the wedding, now fell in loose curls around her shoulders. She looked real. Not like the woman from his father's pitch deck, not like the bride from yesterday's headlines, just her. Good morning, she said softly. Ethan cleared his throat. Morning. There was a pause. Selina glanced at the king-sized bed, still neatly made on one side. You didn't sleep much? No, he admitted. You? Barely. They both smiled faintly, the way strangers sometimes do when realizing they've survived the same storm. A fragile peace had settled between them overnight, an unspoken understanding that while their marriage had been forced, how they handled it now was up to them. Ethan stood and reached for a sweater from the nearby armchair. Coffee? God, yes. They made their way to the kitchen, which felt more like a showroom than a place where people actually cooked. A private chef was scheduled to arrive later that week, but this morning it was just them. Ethan fumbled with the machine while Selina opened a window, letting in a breeze that smelled faintly of early spring. As the coffee brewed, Ethan leaned against the counter and studied her. You're calm, he said, after everything. Selina raised an eyebrow. Should I be panicking? Most people would be. I was raised in a boardroom, Ethan. When you grow up with a father like Gregory Carter, you learn early to put emotion in a box. She paused. Or at least, not show it when people want to see you break. Ethan nodded slowly. He knew that lesson well. Selina accepted her cup and sat at the breakfast bar, sipping thoughtfully. So, now what? He sat beside her. We live our lives. As we agreed, 2 years, we keep up appearances. Attend galas, take photos, maybe give a few interviews about how love bloomed unexpectedly. Selina gave a dry laugh. That won't be difficult. Most of those articles are written before anyone interviews us anyway. And behind the scenes, Ethan continued, we build a strategy, a way to separate our personal assets from the company's. Slowly, carefully. So if we walk away later, we do it on our terms. Smart, she said. I've already begun listing my holdings under a blind trust. My lawyer will help shield my IP from any restructuring attempts by my father. Ethan leaned forward. Do you really think he'd try to seize your division? I know he would, she said. He's been trying to edge me out of product development for years. My position only became permanent because of the engagement. Ethan let out a bitter chuckle. Sounds familiar? I had to sell my soul to the board to keep my position as COO, and now they think this marriage is proof that I'm finally loyal to the empire. Selina looked at him carefully. Are you? Not anymore, he said without hesitation. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Selina spoke again, her voice lower now. Yesterday, when you hesitated at the altar, I saw something in your face. Ethan looked up, wary. What did you see? Hurt, she said. But not just because of me. It was deeper. Like you'd been betrayed by more than just the wedding. Ethan looked away, jaw tight. It's hard to explain. Try me. He hesitated. Then, my mother used to be the only one who questioned my father. Vivian Marshall. Maybe you've met her. She smiled a lot but never said much. After a while, she just stopped fighting. Started pretending everything was fine. I think I always hoped someone in my family would protect me from all this, from becoming part of the machine. Selina's eyes softened. That's a heavy thing to carry. Ethan nodded. And yesterday, watching them celebrate like they'd won something, it made me realize I'm on my own. You're not, she said quietly. He looked at her. We're in this together now, remember? She added, holding his gaze, and something shifted between them. It wasn't love. Not yet, but it was something solid. A thread of mutual recognition. Two people from different worlds, forced into the same corner, finding strength in the only place that made sense now. Each other. That evening, a car arrived to take them to their first post-wedding appearance, a charity dinner benefiting underprivileged students in tech. It was already being framed in the media as the Marshalls and Carters giving back through love. Selina slipped into an emerald green dress. Ethan wore a sharp black suit. In the car, he turned to her. Are you ready to smile for cameras again? Selina gave him a wry smile. If we're going to lie to the world, let's at least make it convincing. And as the flashbulbs lit up around them and guests whispered about how stunning they looked together, Ethan reached for her hand, not just for the cameras, but for real. She didn't pull away. In that moment, it wasn't just business. It was the beginning of something they didn't have a name for yet, but both of them silently agreed it was better than standing alone. 2 days after their carefully choreographed debut as a married couple, Ethan Marshall turned the steering wheel, guiding his black SUV up a narrow mountain road. The city skyline had long faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by pine trees, winding turns, and a silence that stretched deeper than the canyons below. Beside him, Selina Carter stared out the passenger window. She hadn't said much since they left the penthouse, but the tension between them wasn't hostile. It was the quiet of two people still learning how to share space. And after the whirlwind of media interviews, shareholder meetings and fake smiles. The silence was almost welcome. "You ever been to the mountains before?" Ethan asked casually, breaking the calm. Selina glanced at him. "Only once, a company retreat."
The Wi-Fi was bad and everyone panicked. Ethan chuckled. "Well, there's no signal where we're going, no paparazzi. No press, no overbearing parents." "Sounds like paradise," she murmured. The cabin appeared around the next bend, a sleek, wooden glass structure tucked into the hillside, with a view that overlooked a silver lake below. It was modern but simple, the kind of place that didn't ask for attention. It just let you breathe. As they got out of the car, Selina took a slow breath of the crisp air.
"You designed this?" she asked, noting the clean lines and earthy materials. "Most of it," Ethan said. "The extension out back is mine completely. I built it 2 summers ago. I needed a space where nothing was expected of me." She nodded thoughtfully, then followed him inside. The cabin was warm, thanks to an automated heating system already humming softly. The interior was open and filled with natural light-soft couches, a stone fireplace, tall shelves lined with books, and architectural sketches pinned to corkboards along one wall. "This is nothing like your father's house," Selina said quietly. "That's the point." They moved through the space slowly, Ethan showing her the kitchen, the guest bedroom, the reading nook by the big window overlooking the lake. He didn't try to impress her, just shared it the way someone might show a trusted friend a part of themselves that no one else got to see. Later that afternoon, they took a walk along the trail behind the property. The early signs of spring were just beginning to poke through the snowmelt green tips on trees, the chatter of birds returning. Selina didn't speak much, but Ethan noticed how her eyes took everything in. "How did you survive growing up with your father?" Ethan asked gently, as they reached a ridge overlooking the valley. Selina leaned on a wooden rail, thoughtful. "I focused on my work. He respected results, not emotion, so I gave him results. Patents, products, awards. But the more I achieved, the more I felt like a tool." He nodded. "I know that feeling." Selina glanced at him. "You were going to be an architect, weren't you?" Ethan blinked. "How'd you know that?" "I saw the sketches in your office. Your eyes lit up when you talked about design at the gala." He smiled faintly. "I used to think if I could build something real, I'd feel real too. Not just another piece of the Marshall machine." Selina stepped closer, her voice softer. "This cabin feels real." For a moment, they stood together in the wind, looking out at the quiet world below. By nightfall, the sky had shifted. A storm rolled in fast, thunder echoing through the mountains, lightning streaking above the treetops. Rain lashed against the glass, turning the view into a blurred watercolor of grays and shadows. Inside, Ethan lit the fireplace and brought out blankets. Selina changed into a soft hoodie and leggings from the duffel she'd packed. They made a simple dinner, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, the kind of meal that felt like childhood. As they sat near the fire, sipping tea and listening to the storm, Ethan found himself watching Selina closely. Not just her face, but how she moved through the space. How she folded the blanket just so. How she tucked her legs beneath her like she belonged. "You're not what I expected," he said suddenly. Selina looked up. "What did you expect?" "I don't know." "Someone angry, closed off, maybe even bitter." She gave a small smile. "You thought I'd be difficult. I thought I'd be alone in this." Her eyes softened. "You're not." A long pause followed, the crackle of fire, the drumbeat of rain on the roof. And then, Selina said quietly, "I never imagined this either. I didn't plan to like you. But here we are, and this doesn't feel fake." Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. "I know." Their eyes met, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them, trust. Maybe not love, but the start of something that might one day carry that name. Selina broke the silence. "I'll take the guest room." Ethan stood, nodding. Okay, but if the storm gets bad and you need anything. She gave him a look. I'm not afraid of thunder, Ethan. No, he said with a smile, but it's nice to know someone's down the hall. She paused at the door to the guest room. Good night, partner. Good night, Selina. When Ethan lay down on the couch in the main room, staring up at the wooden beams of the ceiling, he realized something. This marriage, as twisted and manipulated as its beginnings had been, was no longer just a contract. It was a story, and it was becoming theirs. The city had never felt louder. Ethan Marshall stood in the marble hallway of Johnson Tech's executive tower, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He had just come from a meeting at Stone Industries, if one could call it that. It felt more like a trap. His father, Harold Marshall, and Gregory Carter had been waiting with a legal team and a proposal, not a suggestion, not a negotiation, a declaration. They wanted to dissolve Selina's division, Assistive Innovations, and fold it under Stone's RD umbrella. They called it streamlining. They used words like optimization and shareholder confidence. But Ethan saw it for what it was, a move to erase Selina's leadership and minimize her growing influence. He pressed the elevator button with more force than necessary. By the time the doors opened on the 40th floor, he had made up his mind. No more quiet resistance, no more playing both sides. Selina was already waiting in the executive conference room, seated at the far end of the long table. Her arms were crossed, but her posture was steady, her face unreadable. When she looked up and saw him, something in her eyes flickered, an emotion too complicated to name. "You heard," she said. He nodded, walking toward her. "They didn't even try to soften it. They think you'll back them," she said. "They think you'll stand beside them like always." Ethan pulled out the chair beside her and sat down. "They're wrong." Selina looked at him. Really looked at him. "I'm with you," he said firmly. "Not just in this room. Not just in public, all the way." Her expression didn't change, but her fingers loosened where they had gripped the armrest. "They're targeting my work, Ethan. My people, my values. And if we let this happen, they'll keep going until there's nothing left that resembles us." "I know." She shook her head slowly. "I built that division from nothing. Those technologies, they help people. Kids with speech delays. Veterans with memory loss. Seniors who want to stay independent. It's not just a project to me. It's personal. And that's exactly why they want it gone," Ethan replied. "Because it's not profitable enough. Not flashy enough for their quarterly reports. And because it's yours." There was silence between them, filled with too many truths to say aloud. Then Ethan stood. "I need to show you something." Selina followed him out of the room and down the hallway into one of the unused boardrooms. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Inside were filescopies of shareholder votes, influence maps, private letters from key allies on both boards. He laid them out like a quiet confession. "I've been working behind the scenes," he said, "gaining support, securing votes, building leverage." Selina looked down at the documents. "You were planning to take them on." "Not just for me," Ethan said. "For you. For us. For the company we want to build." She sat slowly, processing the gravity of what she saw. "You've been preparing for this, since the day they forced us to say I do." She looked up. "What changed?" Ethan hesitated, then said the words without flinching. "You." A quiet filled the space again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Then Selina stood. She placed her hand on his arm, grounding him. "So what now?" she asked. Ethan breathed deeply. "We go public with the truth. We hold a joint board meeting. We expose the restructuring for what it is, a hostile takeover cloaked in corporate language. And we fight. They'll come after us. I'm counting on it." Selina's face softened. "If we do this, there's no going back. Would you want to?"
She smiled, just a little.
No.
That evening, they returned to the penthouse. There was no press, no public display. Just two people who had stood on opposite sides of a forced alliance, now sitting side by side, planning a revolution. They worked late into the night, drafting statements, reviewing reports, aligning strategies. Around midnight, Ethan brought her a mug of chamomile tea. She accepted it quietly, then looked up at him. "You didn't have to choose me."
"I didn't," he replied.
Selina raised an eyebrow. "I chose us."
Her expression faltered, just for a moment.
Then she nodded, her voice quiet. "Thank you." They didn't talk about what it meant, not yet.
But in the stillness of that moment, both of them knew a line had been drawn, not just between them and their parents, but between who they had been and who they were becoming. And neither of them was going back. The morning of the board meeting arrived with the weight of a storm, on the horizon silent but undeniable. Ethan adjusted his tie in the mirror of the downtown penthouse, his reflection betraying the unease that clung to him despite his calm exterior. Behind him, Selina emerged from her study, dressed in a navy blue pantsuit that projected power, grace, and defiance all at once. "You ready?" she asked softly.
"No," Ethan replied, then smiled faintly.
"But let's go anyway." They descended the private elevator in silence. As the doors opened into the marble atrium of Stone Industries headquarters, both of them straightened their backs, not just as a reflex but as armor. Today wasn't just about business. It was about reclaiming their names. The boardroom was already half full when they arrived. Familiar faces, shareholders, executives, legal advisors, all looking up as the couple entered. At the head of the table, Harold Marshall and Gregory Carter sat side by side, their expressions neutral, but their eyes sharp. A united front, at least for now. "Mr. and Mrs. Marshall," Harold greeted them, the sarcasm just barely hidden beneath the formality. "How lovely of you to join us." Ethan didn't respond. He simply walked to the far end of the table and pulled out a chair for Selina before taking his own seat beside her. Gregory cleared his throat. "We're here to finalize the structural changes to the innovation and research divisions, as outlined in the documents sent last week." Selina raised her hand slowly, her voice firm but calm. "Before we begin, I'd like to speak." Harold leaned back. "This isn't the time for personal grievances." "This isn't personal," she replied, unbothered. "This is business, and transparency is good business." Ethan stood with her. "We've distributed revised documentation to all board members this morning," he said, gesturing to the neatly bound files at each seat. "Inside, you'll find a full analysis of the proposed restructuring and an independent audit of the division in question, Selina's division." One of the older board members flipped open the file, scanning the pages. Murmurs began to ripple around the room as more eyes took in the data. Selina continued. "The numbers you were shown last week were manipulated. Selective accounting, projected costs pulled out of context. What you weren't shown was the real impact of our work. Our technologies aren't just profitable, they're transformational." Gregory shifted in his seat. "You're out of line." "No," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "We're finally in line with the truth." He clicked a remote, and the screen at the end of the room came to life. Testimonies began to play videos of children using speech devices, veterans walking with smart braces, seniors reading again with digital overlays. Real people. Real impact. The room went silent. Selina looked down the table. This division was never about headlines or fast returns. It was about doing the kind of work that matters, the kind that builds trust in a brand. You strip it down for short-term profit, and you'll lose something you won't get back. Harold's jaw clenched. "You think we're going to let you stand here and dictate the future of this company?" "You don't have to let me," Ethan said, "because I already secured the votes." Gasps. Movement.
One of the board members leaned over and whispered to another. "I spent the last 2 months doing what you thought I never would," Ethan said. "Building relationships, gaining support, listening. And now, with 62% of shareholder proxy votes, I am exercising my right as co-chair to block this restructuring." Gregory's face flushed.
"You wouldn't dare." Selina leaned forward, her voice quiet but razor-sharp. "You underestimated both of us. You thought marrying us would make us obedient. Instead, you gave us a reason to unite." An older woman down the table, Mrs. Watkins, a long-time board member, spoke for the first time. "I've reviewed the numbers and the testimonies. I vote to table the restructuring indefinitely." Several heads nodded. Another voice added, "We should reassess the leadership structure too. It's clear there's a vision forming that isn't coming from the current executive chairs." Harold slammed his hand on the table. "This is a betrayal." "No," Ethan said quietly. "This is a correction." By the end of the meeting, the room had shifted. The old guard wasn't removed, but the tide had turned. Decisions would no longer be dictated behind closed doors, not without a fight. Not with Ethan and Selina watching. When the room cleared, Ethan stood at the window, looking out over the city. Selina joined him, their shoulders touching. "You sure we didn't just paint a target on our backs?" she asked. He nodded. "Oh, we definitely did." She smiled slightly. "Then we'd better stay close." He turned to her. "I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, Ethan understood something deeper than victory. It wasn't just about saving a division or even changing the company. It was about drawing a line in the sand and finally choosing who he wanted to be on the other side of it. And as long as Selina was standing there with him, it was exactly where he belonged. A week had passed since the boardroom standoff, but the dust had yet to settle. Ethan and Selina had gone back to their routine work during the day, quiet dinners at night, strategy calls with legal teams, and late-night planning sessions at the penthouse. The world saw a united front, and in many ways, that's what they had become. But no amount of professionalism could have prepared them for what was waiting that Wednesday morning. Selina had just poured herself a cup of coffee when Ethan stepped out of his study, reading something on his phone. His brows were drawn together. "You okay?" she asked, handing him a mug. "There's someone downstairs," he said. "Security just called." "She says her name is Lorraine Carter." Selina froze. "My mother?" Ethan nodded slowly. For a moment, Selina didn't say anything. She hadn't seen her mother in over 8 years. Lorraine had left when Selina was still building her career at Johnson Tech, just disappeared one day, leaving behind a goodbye note and a trail of silence. No explanation. No return. "She says she's here to talk," Ethan added gently. Selina set the coffee down. "Let her up." Moments later, the elevator chimed and the door slid open. Lorraine Carter stepped into the penthouse, wearing a beige coat and a tentative expression. She looked older than Selina remembered, her once sleek hair now streaked with grey, her eyes softer, but lined by time. Selina remained standing near the window, arms crossed. She didn't speak first. Lorraine's voice was quiet. "Hello, sweetheart." Selina didn't respond. Lorraine glanced at Ethan, then looked back at her daughter. "I know I don't deserve to be here. I wouldn't blame you if you told me to leave, but I've spent every day of the last 8 years regretting what I did." "Then why did you do it?" Selina's voice cracked anger, grief, something else buried deeper. "Why did you leave without even saying goodbye in person?" Lorraine stepped further into the room. "Because I was drowning. Your father had turned cold. The pressure in that house, the lies, the game sit was killing who I was. And I was too weak to fight it. I thought if I left quietly, I'd spare you the disappointment." Selina's jaw clenched. "You didn't spare me anything. You left me to face him alone. I built everything I have without you." "I know," Lorraine whispered. and I'm so proud of you. That's what I came to say. I've been watching from afar. I saw the board meeting. I read the news. You stood up to him. You did what I never had the courage to do. Selina blinked back, unexpected tears.
You should have stayed. You should have tried. I should have, Lorraine said simply. There's no excuse.
But I want to try now, if you'll let me. Silence settled between them. Ethan stepped quietly out of the room, giving them space. Selina turned back toward the window. I don't know if I can forgive you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to know the woman my daughter became. For a long time, neither of them said a word. Then Selina finally nodded toward the couch. Sit, we'll talk. I'm not making promises, but we'll talk. Lorraine smiled faintly. That's all I'm asking. That evening, Ethan found Selina in the reading nook, her knees drawn up under her chin, a blanket draped over her legs. How are you holding up? He asked, sitting beside her.
I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wanted to scream at her. Another part wanted to hug her.
I did neither. We just talked. And now? Selina leaned her head on his shoulder. Now I'm trying to figure out what to do with all these feelings I thought I'd buried. Anger, sadness, hope. Ethan gently wrapped his arm around her. There's no deadline for forgiveness and no script for family. She let out a slow breath. She said she saw the board meeting. Said I reminded her of someone she used to be. You reminded me of someone too, Ethan said. Someone brave. Someone who refuses to be defined by other people's failures. Selina looked at him. You've changed. So have you. They sat in silence for a long time, the city lights flickering outside like distant stars. Then, softly, she said, Thank you for standing with me, for letting me take up space. Ethan turned to her. You don't take up space. You belong here. And in that moment, with all the chaos behind them and uncertainty still ahead, Selina felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not power, not control, not even forgiveness, but peace. It started with a headline, Billionaire couple accused of staging marriage for corporate takeover. Selina stared at her phone screen in disbelief. It was barely 7 a.m. She'd woken early, made coffee, and planned to finish reviewing a draft proposal before her morning meeting. But one tap on a news notification had stopped everything. By the time Ethan stepped into the kitchen, buttoning the cuff of his sleeve, she was already seated at the breakfast table, jaw tight, phone in hand. You've seen it? She asked without looking up. He nodded. Just now. A beat of silence. Do we know who leaked it? She asked, her voice even, but cold. Not yet, Ethan replied, but the timing says everything. They both knew it had to come from inside. The article quoted anonymous board sources, cited private documentation from earlier merger discussions, and included speculative commentary from financial analysts. Some claimed the marriage had been a corporate strategy all along. Others questioned Selina's leadership, suggesting she had used the marriage to gain access to power and influence. It was the kind of piece designed not just to inform, but to provoke. Selina placed her phone down carefully. This is what they do. When they can't beat you in the boardroom, they drag you through the mud. Ethan sat across from her. We'll handle it. I'm not worried about the press, she said. I'm worried about the people watching young engineers who looked up to me, women who thought I broke through something. What does this tell them? That every success still gets reduced to being someone's wife? Ethan reached for her hand. You are not reduced. And we're not going to let this story be the one that defines us. That afternoon, the pressure intensified. The story spread. Talk shows debated it. Investors called their assistants. Even trusted allies began to ask quiet questions. Were the rumors true? Was the marriage ever real? By evening, Ethan and Selina sat in the penthouse office with their communications advisor, Diane Talbot, a calm, sharp woman in her 50s who had navigated more than one public crisis in her career. "We need to act fast," Diane said. "Silence will be read as guilt." "What are you suggesting?" Selina asked. "A joint interview," Diane replied. "Live. One network. One chance to tell your story directly. You have to get ahead of this." Ethan exhaled. "So we go on camera and prove our marriage is real?" "No," Diane said gently. "You go on camera and prove that your values are real, that your work is real, that this isn't about romance or revenge, it's about what you've built together. If people believe that, the rest won't matter." Selina looked out the window. The sun was setting behind the skyline, casting soft amber light across the floor. "Then let's do it," she said. "I won't let my silence undo everything we've fought for." 2 days later, they sat across from one of the country's most respected journalists, Julia Wilson, National Television. The studio was quiet, lights dimmed, the stage set to feel intimate. Julia looked at them over her glasses. "Some people say you married for power. What do you say to them?" Selina met the camera directly. "I say, power didn't keep us together. Integrity did." Ethan added, "We were forced into something we didn't choose. But what came after the partnership, the work, the respect that was real, and still is," Julia continued. "Were there business advantages to your marriage?" "Of course there were," Selina answered plainly. "We never hid that the merger was part of our family's plan. But the irony is, the more they tried to control us, the more we became our own people. This marriage didn't give me power. It gave me a mirror. It showed me who I wanted to be." "And who is that?" Julia asked. Selina glanced at Ethan before answering. "Someone who builds. Someone who leads with purpose. Someone who's done hiding behind a last name." Julia nodded slowly. "Thank you. Both of you." When the interview aired, something unexpected happened. People listened. Not everyone, not at first, but enough. Enough to shift the tone. Enough to make other outlets question their narratives. Enough to remind the public that beneath every headline was a human story, often more complicated and more inspiring than it seemed. Later that night, as they stood on the penthouse balcony, Ethan handed Selina a glass of wine. "To the weak from hell," he said with a tired smile. She chuckled. "And to surviving it without throwing anything at the TV." They clinked glasses. "I'm proud of you," Ethan said. "Not for what you said on camera, but for how you keep showing up. Every day. No matter how they try to knock you down." Selina looked at him, her voice quieter now. "I meant what I said, you know. About the mirror. You've changed me. Not who I am, but how I see myself." Ethan stepped closer. "You've changed me too." And in that quiet moment, high above a city that never stopped watching, never stopped judging, they didn't feel exposed or vulnerable or defined by gossip. They just felt seen, by each other, by something real. The week after their live interview, the tension finally began to lift. Emails came in from supporters, engineers, businesswomen, even retired executives, thanking Selina and Ethan for standing tall. Stock prices rebounded, and the board, which had quietly panicked behind the scenes, returned to business as usual. At least, that's how it looked on the surface. But in quiet corners of the company, something was stirring. One morning, just after dawn, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a message from their legal counsel. Short, urgent. "We need to talk, now, not over phone." He and Selina met with the team less than an hour later, in the back conference room on the 32nd floor of Stone Johnson Innovations. A printed document lay on the table. Selina picked it up and read the header aloud. "Internal Whistleblower Report. Misappropriation of Funds. Assistive Tech Division." She blinked. "What is this?" The attorney looked grim. "It alleges that funds were redirected through private shell vendors, that someone high-ranking in the division approved it." Selina sat back slowly. "You think someone's framing me?" "We're not saying that," the attorney replied quickly. But the accusations point to your signature on 2 vendor contracts. Dates line up with the months after the merger. Ethan looked at her.
You didn't sign anything like that, right? She didn't answer immediately. I don't think I did.
But there was a month right after the merger. I was signing off on dozens of things each week, fast approvals. It was chaos. Could someone have slipped it in? Ethan asked.
Possibly, the lawyer said, but that's not the only concern. The whistleblower is someone close. Ethan frowned.
Who? There was a pause. Then the attorney spoke carefully. Jordan Ellis. Selina froze. Jordan was her executive assistant, had been with her for 5 years, followed her from Johnson Tech to the merger.
Trusted with passwords, documents, personal meetings. No, Selina said quietly. Jordan wouldn't do this.
Not to me. But the facts were harder than feelings. The documents were real. The signatures matched hers. And the whistleblower, according to protocol, had legal protection. Selina stood up, pacing the length of the glass-walled room. So what now? We've opened an internal audit. We'll review every transaction, but press outlets already have wind of this. It could hit the news any hour now. Ethan turned to Selina.
We'll handle this like we did before, together. But something had shifted. This time it wasn't a stranger's attack.
It came from within their circle, within her team, and something in Selina's face changed, not fear, but grief. That night, they barely spoke over dinner. Not out of anger, but uncertainty. Selina sat quietly, staring at her laptop, scrolling through old invoices, vendor codes, and calendar entries. Ethan watched her from across the kitchen island. You trust me, right? She finally asked, softly. He met her eyes. Of course. But she heard the hesitation, the pause that hadn't been there before, and it cut deeper than she expected. 2 days later, the story broke. Misuse of innovation funds, internal probe targets, co-CEO's division. The article danced around naming her, but everyone knew. Selina Carter, the woman who rose through engineering, who gave speeches about ethical design, now being investigated for financial mismanagement. On social media, hashtags trended, speculation returned. Was the marriage a cover after all? Were they building something good or hiding something worse? Inside the company, whispers started. Not from the engineers they knew her, believed in her, but from marketing, from board assistants, from those who never understood her to begin with. The worst came the following Friday, when a junior board member asked Ethan privately whether Selina should step down temporarily while the audit was ongoing. Ethan refused. Politely, but firmly. But when he told Selina that night, she didn't take it as support. She took it as a warning. So they think I'm dispensable, she said, not looking up from her tablet. No, Ethan replied. They're just afraid. Afraid of what? She asked. That I'll embarrass them? Or that I'll keep fighting for things they can't control? Ethan reached across the table, resting his hand on hers. Selina, I believe you. I just want to find out who's behind this. She pulled her hand away gently. You don't have to say it. I can feel it. The distance. Selina, you hesitate when you speak now, like you're trying to weigh what you want to believe with what you fear might be true. He didn't answer, and in that silence the damage was done. That weekend, she moved into her office's private suite, said she needed quiet to work through documents. Ethan didn't argue. He knew she needed space, but every hour apart deepened the crack between them. What had started as a partnership forged by manipulation had become something real, something rare. But now, the trust that held it all together was on the edge. And Ethan feared that no press conference, no legal report, no proof of innocence could fix the one thing that mattered most, her belief that he was still on her side. The call came at 3:17 a.m., Selina was asleep on the small couch in her office suite, documents scattered on the floor. The phone buzzed once. Then again. She picked it up groggily. "Ms. Carter, it's Diane Talbot," came the voice of their communications advisor. "I think you should come downstairs. Now." 10 minutes later, Selina walked into the conference room on the 32nd floor where Ethan was already seated. Diane stood at the far end of the table with two others from the legal team, papers in hand and tension thick in the air. "What's happened?" Selina asked, her voice low, wary. Diane gave a measured nod. "The audit is complete. We know who forged the signatures." Ethan straightened. "Who?" Diane's gaze shifted gently toward Selina. "Jordan Ellis didn't submit the report." Selina frowned. "But the whistleblower file. It was planted, under Jordan's access code, but digital trails don't lie." IT traced the real upload to someone else entirely. She slid a folder across the table. Selina opened it and stared at the name, her father's. "William Carter." Ethan exhaled sharply. "He framed his own daughter?" "Not exactly," Diane said. "It wasn't about framing you. It was about undermining you. The goal wasn't to ruin you completely. It was to force your resignation, destabilize the division, and regain influence over the merged company." "Quiet control, not destruction." Selina's hands trembled, but her voice was clear. "Does he know we know?" "He will by morning," the attorney replied. "And once we release this report, so will the board." There was silence. Selina sat back in her chair and looked out the glass wall at the city below, still dark, still silent. Her heart didn't break. It just sank. Ethan leaned toward her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Selina, I'm so sorry. I should have believed harder." "Stood firmer." She looked at him not coldly, but quietly. "You believed enough," she said. "Even when you didn't know the full story, you didn't walk away." Ethan swallowed, then asked the question that had haunted him for weeks. "Do you still trust me?" Selina reached across the table and took his hand. "I never stopped. I just forgot how to show it." The fallout was swift. By midday, the company's official statement was released. Clear. Transparent. No spin. It named the source of the forged documentation, confirmed Selina's full exoneration, and included a timeline of the manipulation with evidence. But what surprised the public wasn't just the facts. It was the tone. The statement ended with a line that read, "Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from strangers, but neither does redemption. Trust rebuilt is stronger than trust untested." And it was signed. Selina Carter, Ethan Marshall, co-CEOs, Stone Johnson Innovations. That evening, as the news broke, reporters praised the company's transparency. Investors responded favorably. Shareholders backed them. And the public? They finally stopped asking if the marriage was a front. Because no one fakes standing beside someone who's just been betrayed by family and still holds her head high. Weeks passed. Selina met with her father once in a small private cafe downtown. There were no cameras, no statements, just a quiet conversation between two people who would never see the world the same way again. When she returned home that evening, Ethan didn't ask what was said. He just opened the door, took her coat, and made her tea. That, she realized, was all she needed. Not answers. Just presence. On a warm spring morning, Stone Johnson Innovations held a press event for their new public tech initiative, Affordable Assistive Devices, to be distributed through schools and clinics across underserved communities. Selina stood on the rooftop podium, a soft breeze catching the edge of her blazer, and looked out at the crowd of engineers, students, and families. "This project," she began, "was once a dream, a blueprint on paper. Now it's a promise to see every person, regardless of income or background, as worthy of innovation." Ethan stood beside her, eyes fixed on her not as a partner in business, but in belief. She turned toward him. And this company, she continued, stands because people believed in something bigger than profit, trust, second chances, and choosing each other every day. Applause echoed across the rooftop. That night, Ethan and Selena sat quietly on their balcony, the stars flickering above them. "Do you remember," he said, "that first night, after the wedding, when you offered to sleep on the couch?" He smiled. "You told me the bed was big enough for two, but we still slept a world apart." Selena chuckled softly. "We didn't know what we were building then," she said. "Just that it wasn't going to look like anything our parents wanted." He reached for her hand. "What do you think we've built now?" Selena thought for a long moment. "Not just a company, or a marriage," she said, "but a place where truth stands, even when people try to bury it." She looked at him and smiled. "And that is something worth building forever." In life, not every beginning is honest, but that doesn't mean the ending can't be true. The story of Ethan and Selena reminds us that even when relationships start under the weight of manipulation or social pressure, trust and love can still grow if both people are willing to choose honesty, patience, and respect over ego and expectation. Their journey teaches us that healing begins the moment we stop pretending and start listening to each other and to our own values. We learn that integrity is not about having perfect circumstances, but about making the right choices once truth is revealed. More importantly, their story shows that legacies can be rewritten, that we are not prisoners of the paths others chose for us. Whether it's a marriage, a family business, or our role in the world, we always have the power to reshape the future, not just for ourselves, but for those who come after. In the end, the lesson is simple. You can't always choose how something begins, but you can always choose how it grows. And sometimes the most unexpected detours lead us exactly where we're meant to be.